The Illuminate Arts and Faith Conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee wants to help you find your tribe. Do you get way too excited about quoting Wendell Berry or C.S. Lewis in conversations with coworkers? Does your Spotify playlist include hymns, a little jazz, and a whole lot of Andrew Peterson? Join your tribe at Illuminate March 31 and April 1 for education and inspiration from speakers Russ Ramsey, Douglas McKelvey, John Hendricks, and others. Find a complete list of session topics and ticket information at southern.edu/illuminate.
In 2024, I set out to meet as many poets as I could and spend an hour with each one. I got more than I bargained for, more insight, more clarity, more hope. It's proved to be one of the richest highlights of my life. 17 writers, 17 deeply human conversations that made me sit up and pay attention. Franz Kafka once said, if the book we're reading doesn't wake us up with a blow to the head, what are we reading for? A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us. And that's what I hope this new book will do. I hope it wakes us up, my friends. I hope these conversations will be the catalyst for something to be reawakened, re-enchanted, and reinvigorated. It's called An Axe for the Frozen Sea, Conversations with Poets About What Matters Most. I'm Ben Palpin, and I hope you'll come and listen in as I spend a little time with poets like Lucy Shaw, Malcolm Guite, Dana Gioia, and Lee Young Lee. Pull up a chair at the table as we dig into what it means to write well and to live well. An Axe for the Frozen Sea is now available from Rabbit Room Press. Visit the store at rabbitroom.com, or better yet, ask about it at your favorite bookseller.
At least in my own life, where I've felt the most distress is when I felt like I had to be this or this, instead of saying, man, I can be a person of faith who also wants to grieve well with people and not minimize their suffering or that kind of thing. So that, or wow, this with a client, like, wow, this thing that happened to you is horrible. And how do we move on while also acknowledging this thing that happened is horrible? So I think that's what I mean by integration.
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. Jill Phillips is a singer-songwriter and the star of the Gullahorn Happy Hour, along with her husband, Andy Gullahorn. She's also a marriage and family therapist and really just one of my favorite people to talk to. She'll soon be releasing a new album called Deeper Into Love, a collection of songs that take a journey through grief, healing, and redemption. In this episode, Jill and I talk about the gap between the truth and how it feels, integration and disintegration, and going boldly into the house of grief. Jill Phillips, I'm so happy that you're on the Habit Podcast today.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's so good to be with you.
And I'm also very excited about your new EP, Deeper Into Love, that's coming out probably about the time I don't know when it's coming out. I'm a little vague on that. Are you vague on that?
I am also vague on that.
Okay.
That's the pleasure of being an independent artist.
Yeah, right.
It's going to have a staggered release.
You have said this is a EP that walks through the journey of grief and healing and redemption. Mm-hmm. And I know one of the songs, and these songs most of them you've been performing a good bit for a while. Yes. Is that right?
Yeah. I haven't done a project in 5 years. So I think, I don't know if that's fully true. I need to think about that. I can't remember when Lead Me Home happened. And then that was, gospel music. But of my original stuff, it's been a while because I went back to grad school and all of that. So some of these songs are, several years old. Some of them were finished right before the EP.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I've been thinking about one of the lines from the song "Love Is a Long Game" that seems to me it sort of it makes me think of a lot of songs you've written through the years, and the line goes, somewhere between the truth and how it feels, there's a disconnect. Mm-hmm. And that's that gap between the truth and how it feels. It seems like you've spent a lot of time there, and you've written about that a lot, and it's been productive for you.
I would hope it's been productive. Maybe I write about it a lot because I'm stuck on it. I don't know. I wonder if the gap between the truth and how it feels is like what it is to be human. You know, if there's something about just writing about humanity in this life, maybe that's just what it is. Maybe there's always a little bit of a gap between the truth and how it feels. And then we have these moments of clarity that are gifts, and then we're muddling through, and then we, you know, maybe that's the cycle.
Yeah. And, you know, the writer, whether you're a songwriter or a poet or a prose writer or whatever, it seems is, you know, one of our jobs is to, when the gap closes a little bit, to give words to it.
Yes. Yes.
To remind us, this is what I know, this is what it feels like, but this is what's true.
Yes.
And, I think that's one thing I've loved about your music for a long time, is that it's really good at doing that.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
You know, I've been thinking some lately about the idea that, you know, objective truth and subjective experience, it's not like some people believe in objective truth and some people believe in subjective truth. It's like we all know that there's truth, that it's just true whether we feel it or not, or know it or not, or can see it or not. It's just, there's just truth. But that doesn't change the fact that the way we experience truth, or the way we feel about truth, or whatever, is it changes all the time.
That is so true. And I think maybe a lot of the distress comes when those things are fragmented, when they're compartmentalized and fragmented, you know, like in therapy work, a healing from trauma or anything is about integration. It's about the both and so maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's an attempt to integrate those two realities of being human, instead of feeling distress that there are these two things.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I don't even know if that makes any sense, but
I think it does. And you know, when you speak of, you said in therapy work, whatever, you are a therapist besides being a singer-songwriter.
Mm-hmm. That's a new thing. Yeah.
Right.
5 years. Yeah.
In the last 5 years, you said?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I went back to grad school. I think it was 5 years ago now, 6 years ago, maybe. And I've been sitting with clients for about 3 years now. Yeah.
So what can you say about the relationship between your experience as a therapist and your experience as a person who also does creative work?
I've thought about this a lot, and I'm sure there's more to be learned as I continue in this job. I think one thing that's really similar is both people are paying attention, the artist and the therapist. You know, you really have to be paying attention. They're both kind of jobs that at their best can sort of be living in the deep end of life. You know, you're having to hold space for beautiful things and hard things and all of that. Where they feel really different is ideally in music. At the end of the day, you do all that and people are like, yay, good job. And as a therapist, not so much. Yeah.
Sometimes they don't recognize you in the grocery store.
Yeah, or they hate you.
Okay, more to the point.
So it's really, they're really different in that way.
Wow. You said at its best, you're living in the deep end of life.
Mm-hmm.
I would think that, correct me if I'm wrong, that as a counselor or as a therapist, you're at the deep end of life, whether it's at its best or not at its best, right? Isn't that just where you always live as a counselor, or do I have that wrong?
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I mean, I guess what I mean is like anything can be made into platitudes or fixes or the commercialization of something, anything, even therapy, music, all of that. But I think in their purest forms, they're both really meant to be about paying attention and living in those deep places.
Yeah. And as you said, integrating.
Yep. And I think that is one thing that's really helped me kind of from music into this work is artists are, I think, at their best integrating things all the time. They're going, wow, look at that. That reminds me of this. And that also reminds me of this. And I think that's really helped me as a therapist, just to be constantly going, oh, where does that remind me of this and this and this? And instead of being in one lane, just going, wow, I love that family systems remind me of this about the Enneagram. And then it overlaps with this around trauma work, and just integrating all of it is really interesting to me.
Yeah. That's the nature of metaphor, isn't it? Here's this thing over here that reminds me of this thing over here. And those things can shake hands at least for a little while. Yeah,
I love that. So I think that helps, being in that kind of practice for so many years.
Yeah. We've mentioned the word integrate several times, but I'm not sure, but could you speak to what you even mean by, I'm not sure we were even clear about what you mean by integrate as distinct from disintegration.
Sure. Gosh, I'm trying to think of how, I don't even know that I'm the best person to explain it, but I can tell you what it looks like for me is, somewhere on this, I'm all nerding out here, but somewhere on this continuum between like rigidity and chaos, there's this beautiful like in between in the middle that's like structure with flexibility, or that sort of thing, holding these seemingly disparate things. Like in Bright Sadness, the song from my EP, how do you be a person who doesn't minimize sorrow and also is full of hope? I've just find that, those paradoxes are very much a part of us. And at least in my own life, where I've felt the most distress is when I felt like I had to be this or this, instead of saying, man, I can be a person of faith who also wants to grieve well with people and not minimize their suffering, or that kind of thing. So that, or wow, this with a client, like, wow, this thing that happened to you is horrible. And how do we move on while also acknowledging this thing that happened is horrible? So I think that's what I mean by integration.
One thing I've said before, and I think I've said to you before about your songs, is that you the way you write about the world reminds us that it's in the brokenness of the world that's where grace works, right? It's the only place grace works is where we need grace, where we need mercy, and where we don't need mercy, where we don't feel disintegration, or where we don't feel where we feel all right. That's not a place where grace comes to do its work.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I've not thought of it like that before, but that makes sense.
Yeah. Again, as I've been thinking about, it makes so much sense to me after knowing your work and your life for so long that you're a therapist now. That makes just perfect sense.
That's so kind. It was probably more of a surprise to me than it was to, I've had a number of people tell me that. I was like, wow, It really took me by surprise. I wish y'all had told me sooner.
You thought you were a rock star, and turns out
I just love doing both. I really love doing both. They feel nice and complementary to each other. And I love that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Another line that I've really been pondering from this new EP is that refrain, "I will go boldly into the house of grief." And I what a great idea, in an EP that's about, as you said, grief and healing and redemption. Can you tell me about that? That idea of going boldly into the house of grief and what it means, where it came from, whatever.
Yeah, I wish I could take credit for that line, but I heard it on a podcast. A woman who is a chaplain at national parks.
Really?
And she was being interviewed on The Moth. And this was years ago. It was after there was a death.
Was she from Maine?
That sounds right. I think that sounds right. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah. I mean, I think I remember the person. I don't remember her saying house of grief. I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
Well, it must have just stood out to me because it's been years, and I actually haven't gone back to listen to the podcast, but in a while. But we had just experienced a loss in our community that was really significant. About 6 years ago, and we were really sad, and we were on this road trip and listening to them off. And this woman started talking about her work. It was before I had gone back to school to be a therapist, I think. And she was talking about how people always ask her, how can you be a chaplain and do this? How can you sit with people, in their accidents? How can you sit with people in this great grief? And she said, well, it's because I've been there and I've experienced it, and I've been through that, and I don't fear it anymore. And then she said at the end, I can go boldly into the house of grief because I just know it's love and death, or love squaring up against its oldest enemy, death. And after all this time, I know that love gets the last word.
Wow.
And I just
love squaring up against its oldest enemy, you said?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Which is death. And then she said, and I know that after all this time, love gets the last word. And so she can go boldly in. And I thought, man, that phrase just always stuck with me. And I've thought of it many times since, when people are like, how can you do this work? How can you sit in these hard stories? And I just thought, well, because I've been through hard, and also I have hope. So I thought she said it beautifully, and I just always thought I wanted to write a song about that.
Yeah. I think it's the same, it has to be the same song. The line is about love gets the last word, and then you said the last word is good.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's in, I referenced it in 2 songs actually intentionally. I did it in House of Grief and also in Love is a Long Game. I put that line in both of them because at the time I thought one would start the record and one would end the record. So I wanted to do that.
Yeah. The last word was good, but almost the first word was good too, right? When God created the world, he said, this is good, and this is good, and this is very good.
See, this is why I need you. I need you for all the theological stuff.
But yeah, so we're like sandwiched between a good word and a good word, but we're still here in the valley.
Here we are. There's the both and, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's so good. I love it. Okay, let me see if we're ready to talk about Gullahorn Happy Hour yet. Yeah, I need to ask you about Gullahorn Happy Hour. That's one of the great things to come out of the pandemic, I think, is Gullahorn Happy Hour.
Oh man, it's still. We had one last night. Andy said it was episode 73.
I guess there may be some listeners who don't know what Gullahorn Happy Hour is, so maybe you can tell us.
Yes. It's really just an online show that's free that we do on my husband, Andy Gullahorn's Instagram and Facebook page. It was his idea, as all fun things are. Other than karaoke, which is usually my idea, and that is also fun. But he came up with this idea in the pandemic, and I think it was more just about staying connected. There was no ambition for it. There was no other than just, hey, we can't do shows. Here we are stuck. What I can give is music to light the darkness. Let's just do some free shows. And we started doing like 3 a week. And then, slowly had to pare it down to like 1, and then 1 like bi-weekly when travel came back.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's become a community. We were so surprised. I mean, I was just so surprised. We get emails from people like, hey, now I'm friends with so-and-so. I met them for lunch, or, they're like teasing each other and becoming friends in their own community. It's so sweet.
Yeah. I have never attended one live actually, but I've watched the recordings, and it is so fun to see the interactions between the, y'all and the audience, or whatever you call it.
It's so much fun. It really is so much fun. We've just grown to love it. I think it surprised both Andy and I, because we both tend to underestimate probably ourselves and anything. And so the fact that it would go on and continue like this has been a real delight.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's such a neighborly little thing to do, I think.
It really is. I think, and it feels very congruent with who we are, and very much who Andy is. And he's got the games going on. Like, if you've never seen it before, he's got always Instagram, playing Facebook, and he's very competitive. And so he just loves it. He loves everything. He always comes up with these ridiculous Family Feud questions. And
Yeah. I wanted to ask. So I know you play Family Feud at Gullahorn Happy Hour.
yeah. Yep.
Is there some sort of Family Feud game you can get cards with survey questions on them?
There is. And
Okay.
even one of our listeners got so annoyed with the old box questions that they sent us the new one.
Oh, really?
About that. And then sometimes Andy will just make up his own, and he'll do like a survey on Instagram. He'll just make up who's the greatest Andy or something like that, and then get all the answers and compile them, and we'll do that.
Oh, that's hilarious. How do you, I've been a little vague also on how you compete Instagram against Facebook. It just means you have two different windows up on your screen and you see which one is.
Two different phones. It's really that high tech. We've tried so many other things. Like he tried getting really high tech with cameras and lights and all this, but the best service and the best picture every time was just his phone on one stand, my phone on the other stand. So one of them is Facebook and one of them's Instagram.
Okay, that's really
it. That's the extent. He even tried doing a fancy light, and people were like, "What's weird?" So he just turned it off, and he's like, "All right, just straight to the phone."
Oh, that's so funny. Yep. Okay, so I see. You're
live. So Instagram Live, Facebook Live on one signed in on this phone, one signed in on this phone. And so the comments come in real time, and he's watching this one and I'm watching this one.
Oh, that's okay. That's hilarious. I did not know it was that goofy.
Yeah, it's that goofy.
Okay. All right. Well, it's this. Listeners, if you don't attend Gullahorn Happy Hour, you really should.
We've got a Christmas one coming up. I think it's the Monday before the week of Christmas, where we're going to do all your Christmas requests. We usually wear ugly sweaters, the whole deal. So Come on and join us. It's free. Just hop on Instagram or Facebook Live.
Okay. All right. We'll have to check that out for sure. It's yet another sort of neighborly act by the Gullahorns. And I love I guess I should have, and you've already touched on this. You are Jill Phillips Gullahorn.
Yes.
And Andy, so in real life, you're
the Gullahorn. That's right.
And in your professional life, you're Jill Phillips. And I have,
music life, yeah.
I've told this story in other contexts, but I've never said it on my own podcast. So I'm going to tell this story now. And you know what story is coming up, Jill. That one day I was listening to a Jill Phillips CD, and my son, who was I think about 11 at the time, he came by, and he knew about Jill Phillips, he knew about Ms. Gullahorn, and he looked at the CD cover and says, "Jill Phillips looks so much like Mrs. Gullahorn." And I was like, "They're the same person, didn't you? You didn't realize that?"
His mind is like, what? That lady who's been giving me snacks in the kitchen? What the heck?
Yeah,
I know that has made me laugh so many times.
Yeah.
Integration, right?
What's that?
Integration.
That's right. There you go. That's exactly what it is. Because you've got this life. I mean, the music that you do, the work you do is coming straight out of this life where you are a neighbor.
100%.
And a
mom
and
a friend.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's where for me, those two, maybe that's another, we're gonna exhaust the word integration, but it's like, to me, those two things can't be disconnected. And I think that's where artists and therapists and everything else we can really go wrong, is when we try to disconnect those two things. That feeds, like, what I'm learning in life and my relationships feeds the music, feeds the work. If it doesn't, I'm just all disconnected, and just all messed up.
Yeah. I remember one time I attempted to do a Sad Stories Told with Laughs interview with you, and you were so well integrated and healthy that you didn't have any really outlandish stories to tell about your career. You didn't.
Oh gosh, I can't believe that. I feel like I would totally have stories now.
You had some stories, but they.
Nothing
they
too
usually
terrible.
ended with, but you have to really remember, I was just really lucky to get to do this at all. Like, that's not the spirit of Sad Stories Told for Laughs. You're supposed to be
I think I could go there more today. I could feel way more sorry for myself.
Okay, good. Well, I should have called you for my revival of Sad Stories Told.
Yeah, call me now. Yeah,
maybe next summer.
totally.
All right. Well, I've got one more question for you, and that is, sure. Who are the writers who make you want to write?
Gosh, it's so seasonal. There are people that have consistently been inspiration to me over the years. Those people are Amy Mann is one of my favorite songwriters. Mm-hmm. I think what I love about her is her songs are so understandable, and I think that's really amazing. They're so relatable. They're so hard to write and yet so simple. I never have difficulty tracking where she's going, but yet I know, gosh, that had to be a really hard song to write. Mm-hmm. So I love that. I'm really inspired by people who make beautiful music that also has great lyrics. I think I've realized that about myself. As a songwriter, I know I should just say I'm only inspired by lyrics or whatever, but the music really matters to me just as much. And if it moves me, and so if a song has great lyrics, but it doesn't like sound good or feel good in my body, I'm not that interested.
Yeah.
And I think David Mead does that really well. I think Rufus Wainwright does that really well. I think Neil Finn does that really well, where you're not sure if you're moved more by the lyric or the sound.
Yeah.
I love music like that.
Yeah. I don't have any language for even talking about that except in completely mysterious terms. I'm always amazed by, songwriters who can even know what to say about it, right? To me, I just don't even have the vocabulary for it, and I love that stuff that I don't even know how to talk about. That
intangible. There's an intangible to it. I think I'm also
intangible. Is it as intangible to you as it is to somebody like me, you think?
I think so.
You think so?
I really do.
You see Rufus Wainwright do something, you think that really moved me, but I don't know how.
Maybe I have some more technical language for it because it's in my field, but still at the end of the day, it's all mystery, isn't it? Even when a song is given to us.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know how I had a song today, but I didn't yesterday. I don't know.
Yeah,
that feels really mysterious. Like I told Andy, the last song that was written on for this EP is Prison of the Past. And I knew what I wanted to write. I knew that I wanted it to say Prison of the Past. I knew what I wanted to write it about. I knew I wanted it to sound like. Mm-hmm. But it was only on one particular day that I was like in the shower and the chorus came to me in the full. And I'm like, I didn't do anything to make that happen. I was just open and interested. But yesterday it wasn't there.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's fascinating to me.
I was reading in Joseph Pieper's book, Only the Lover Sings. Have you ever read that book?
No.
It's a great book. But he talks about the idea that, now I'm going to get it wrong, but basically it's true that the work can't happen without us, but it kind of happens without us.
I agree. I totally agree. It's so humbling, isn't it? It keeps you, it keeps you having to be connected with the creator, I think, because it's like, wow, he is partnering with me and using me. And there is something of myself that I'm bringing to this. I don't want to undervalue myself, but also, why today and not yesterday? It's very mysterious.
Yeah. He puts it in terms of being in a posture of openness to receive.
I like that.
And so we've got to be there. We got to show up to receive.
Yep.
And but yet it's a posture of reception, not if I work just a little bit harder, I can make this.
I love that.
Sometimes you have to work a little harder. I don't know. It's a mystery coming in.
It is a dance. It is a strange dance.
Yeah.
I love how that is said. That makes sense to me.
Yeah. Well, I really am grateful that you leave yourself open to receive and that you've received so many beautiful things through the years. So
thank you
keep it
so
up.
much.
And
thank you so much.
Love the way that you're integrating all this together, Jill.
Now that I said that, I'm like, I'm going to really, I'm not going to be able to integrate anything for like the next week.
Yeah. Do you have you read Kurt Thompson, his stuff?
I have. Yeah. He's a friend. He's a good friend of ours.
He is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe you can ask him if he'd come on the Habit podcast.
I would be happy to ask him.
Yeah. That his way of talking about integration and disintegration, I think, is super helpful.
I do too. It's made the most sense to me of anything. Maybe that's because I'm an artist and because that in his heart, he's really a poet. You know, he's a writer and a psychiatrist, but really he's got an artist's heart. And I don't know, maybe it's because that's how God does it. I don't know. Maybe we're all longing for that in some way.
Yeah, I think that's right. All right. Thanks, Jill.
Hey, thank you, Jonathan. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
This podcast is brought to you by The Rabbit Room, where art nourishes community and community nourishes art. And all our podcasts are made possible by the generous support of our members. To learn more about us, visit rabbitroom.com. And to become a member, rabbitroom.com/donate. Special thanks as well to Taylor Linhart for letting us use her song Diamonds as the theme music for Season 3 of the Habit Podcast. You can learn more about Taylor and follow her work at taylorlinhart.com.
The Habit membership is a library of resources for writers by me, Jonathan Rogers. More importantly, The Habit is a hub of community where like-minded writers gather to discuss their work and give each other a little more courage. Find out more at thehabit.co.
If you've enjoyed this podcast episode, consider joining the Rabbit Room membership. Your membership helps sustain this community, funding everything from publishing and podcasts and theater productions to events and programs that support artists who create with a Christ-centered vision. We'd love to have you on board. Learn more at rabbitroom.com/member.